For centuries, humanity was seen as small. Not merely young, but insignificant. In a galaxy ruled by ancient civilizations and star-spanning empires, humans were a statistical footnote. One species among thousands, clustered around a modest yellow star, arguing among themselves while greater powers shaped the fate of entire sectors. They were ignored by the galaxy. When human envoys first appeared before the Galactic Council, they were granted the courtesy reserved for curiosities. Polite attention. Patient smiles. Their words were recorded, archived, and quietly forgotten. Humanity spoke of threats beyond known borders, of patterns in deep space anomalies, of dangers that did not announce themselves with fleets and banners. The Council nodded and moved on. Those in power dismissed the warnings as paranoia born of inexperience. Humanity lacked the longevity to recognize long cycles of galactic history. They lacked the technological pedigree to see beyond established doctrine. Their data conflicted with centuries of Council consensus, and consensus in the galaxy was law. "You are mistaken," the Council said. "You are overreacting," they said. "The galaxy has endured far worse." Humanity insisted. They showed projections, sensor correlations, mathematical models that suggested something vast, predatory, and patient moving through the dark between stars. They did not demand authority. They asked for preparation, joint monitoring, shared defense frameworks, contingency planning. The request was denied. The Council classified the findings as inconclusive. Resources were redirected to more immediate concerns: border disputes, trade negotiations, political theater among species that had been rivals for millennia. Humanity was advised to focus on its own development, to mature, to learn its place. And so the warnings ended. Not because humanity stopped seeing the signs, but because they understood something then that would define everything that followed. No one was coming to help. The galaxy mistook humanity's silence for acceptance. In truth, it was resolve. While the Council congratulated itself on maintaining stability, humanity returned to its systems and began preparing alone. Not loudly. Not publicly. There were no declarations of defiance, no dramatic withdrawals from galactic affairs. Just quiet change. Research budgets shifted. Long-term defense initiatives accelerated. Engineers and scientists were given unprecedented freedom to test theories the Council had deemed impractical or dangerous. Humanity stopped asking for permission and started asking harder questions. What if the warnings were correct? What if the galaxy's confidence was misplaced? What if survival depended not on tradition, but on adaptability? To the Council, humanity remained weak. Their fleets were small, their territory limited, their influence negligible. But weakness was a misunderstanding. Humanity had never survived by dominance. They survived by noticing danger early and refusing to ignore it. No one realized how dangerous that mistake would be, because when the galaxy finally faced the truth humanity had warned them about, it would not be ancient empires or ceremonial councils that stood ready. It would be the species that had been dismissed, ignored, underestimated, the species that had prepared in silence. And by then, humanity would no longer be asking the galaxy to listen. They would be proving they had been right all along. The warnings should have ended the discussion. Instead, they made humanity a problem. Within the chambers of the Galactic Council, concern quietly shifted into suspicion. A young species insisting that the galaxy itself was unprepared was not seen as vigilant, it was seen as disruptive. Humanity's data challenged long-held assumptions, and in a civilization built on precedent, that was unacceptable. So the Council tightened its grip. At first, the pressure was indirect. Human research requests were denied, pending further review. Joint defense initiatives were quietly shelved. Trade inspections targeting human vessels increased, slowing commerce under layers of regulation and routine compliance checks. Humanity was told to be patient. Then trade was cut. Key hyperspace corridors were reclassified as restricted, severing human supply lines overnight. Contracts were voided without negotiation. Human merchant fleets were turned away from ports they had used for decades, their cargo impounded under newly written security statutes. The Council framed it as a precaution. Your technology development has become erratic, they claimed. Your projections risk destabilizing interstellar relations. This is for the safety of all. Rights followed trade into erasure. Human diplomats lost legal protections in council space. Appeals were dismissed without hearing. Human-owned stations were seized or dismantled under the justification of preventive security. Even humanitarian requests, medical shipments, disaster relief, were delayed until they were no longer useful. And then came isolation. A formal motion passed with minimal debate. Humanity's access to council space was revoked. Patrol fleets established exclusion zones around every known human system. Automated beacons broadcast warnings declaring human territory restricted, violations punishable by force. Humanity was pushed into isolation, not because of aggression, but because they had dared to question the galaxy's certainty. The Council expected collapse. They had seen this pattern countless times. Young civilizations cut off from trade fractured under pressure. Political unity failed. Colonies turned on one another. Scarcity did the rest. Eventually, what remained would return to the Council quieter, compliant, and grateful. The Council waited. Months passed. Human traffic vanished from Council sensors. Communication intercepts dwindled. No distress signals crossed the borders. Analysts marked the situation as progressing within acceptable parameters. Containment had worked. What the Council failed to notice was what silence truly meant. Inside human space, arguments ended faster. Decisions came harder and cleaner. Warnings were no longer sent outward, they were acted upon inwardly. Resources once spent on diplomacy were redirected into survival. Humanity did not fracture. They recalibrated. Every sanction became confirmation. Every restriction became proof. Every closed border reinforced the same conclusion. The galaxy would rather suppress a warning than face it. And so humanity stopped trying to convince anyone. The Council believed isolation would weaken them. In reality, it removed distraction. And while the galaxy congratulated itself on silencing a troublesome voice, humanity was learning exactly how alone they truly were, and exactly what that meant for the future. Isolation did not shatter humanity. It focused them. For most of their history, humans had been divided, by borders, by ideology, by the lingering scars of wars that predated their first steps into space. Even among the stars, those divisions followed them. Earth argued with its colonies. Corporations guarded secrets. Military commands planned for conflicts that never came. The Galactic Council believed isolation would tear those fractures open. Instead, it erased them. The moment the last trade route closed and council signals went silent, humanity understood the truth no speech could soften. No one was coming. There would be no appeals. No allies. No shared defense. Survival was no longer a collective galactic effort. It was a human one. Emergency assemblies formed across every human system. Old rivals sat across from one another not as enemies, but as equals facing extinction. Arguments still happened. Humans argued by nature, but they ended with decisions instead of stalemates. Unity was no longer idealism. It was necessity. Earth did not declare itself a ruler. It became a coordinate, a reference point around which everything else aligned. Colonies answered not out of loyalty, but because fragmentation meant death. Supply lines were collapsing. Borders were meaningless. Only cooperation mattered. Within a single cycle, treaties that had defined human politics for centuries were dissolved. Corporate sovereignties were stripped away. Military commands once designed to counter each other merged into a single structure. Unified human command was established. Not as an empire. As a shield. Every colony stood under one command, not through force, but through consensus forged under pressure. Resources were pooled without negotiation. Agricultural worlds fed industrial hubs. Research stations opened their databases completely. Shipyards synchronized production as if distance itself had become irrelevant. Isolation forced efficiency. Redundancy became doctrine. Every system learned to operate independently if cut off, yet reintegrate seamlessly when contact returned. Communications were rebuilt with layered encryption and autonomous relays, ensuring no single failure could ever silence humanity again. Something deeper changed as well. Humans stopped thinking of themselves as scattered worlds. They began to think as one civilization. Education shifted. History was no longer taught as a chain of internal conflicts, but as a record of survival through adaptation. Children learned why the warnings had been ignored, and why preparation could never be delegated to others again. Culture followed strategy. Art grew sharper, more defiant. Music carried themes of endurance rather than triumph. Stories no longer waited for rescue. They ended with humanity standing together against the dark. If no one else would protect them, they would protect themselves. Civilian industries merged with defense research. Medical advances fed directly into survivability programs. Terraforming technologies became planetary defense systems. Infrastructure built for hostile worlds was repurposed for ships and stations designed to endure the unimaginable. Humanity did not grow more aggressive. They grew more deliberate. By the time distant council sensors began to notice something wrong, human systems behaving less like isolated points and more like synchronized nodes in a single network, it was already too late. Isolation had done what centuries of diplomacy never could. It had unified humanity completely. And when unity replaced division, humanity became something the Council had never planned for. A species that no longer asked the galaxy to listen. A civilization that no longer needed permission to prepare. From that moment on, humanity was no longer waiting to be protected. They were preparing to ensure they never would have to wait again. Silence settled over human space. To the Galactic Council, it looked like retreat. To humanity, it was permission. With no treaties left to honor and no observers left to appease, human innovation accelerated beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. Research once slowed by interstellar oversight was unleashed. Projects labeled destabilizing or unnecessary were reopened under a single guiding question. Will this keep us alive when the warning proves true? In that silence, humanity evolved. Engineers abandoned orthodox hyperspace theory, questioning assumptions the Council treated as immutable law. New engines emerged, drives that did not simply move ships between stars, but reshaped the routes themselves. Human vessels no longer relied on fixed corridors. They could appear where sensors were blind and depart along vectors no model predicted. To the galaxy, human space appeared stagnant. In reality, it was rewriting physics. Defense followed innovation. Where Council shields absorbed energy until failure, human shields learned to redirect it. Incoming force was folded, dispersed, and bled into higher dimensional space. Weapons that could tear through cruisers simply vanished on contact, leaving behind nothing but warped vacuum. Test records repeated a single line. Integrity maintained. Hull design transformed as well. Ships were no longer built from static alloys, but grown from adaptive composites, materials that hardened under stress, reconfigured after damage, and remembered every impact. Each strike became data. Each battle, a lesson learned before it was ever fought. Unbreakable was never the goal. Survival was. Shipyards expanded in places no one monitored, inside hollowed asteroids, beneath the crusts of dead worlds, and drifting within gravitational shadows where probes failed and sensors lied. Entire fleets were constructed beyond Council awareness, their existence hidden not by secrecy, but by neglect. And these fleets were different. They were not designed for conquest or intimidation. There were no ceremonial flagships or towering command spires. Human vessels were blunt, modular, and ruthlessly functional. Every ship could fight. Every ship could repair another. Every ship could operate alone, or as part of a seamless whole. Doctrine evolved alongside technology. Human fleets trained to fight while outnumbered, to lose ships and continue, to adapt in real time. Command was decentralized, resilient to disruption. Artificial intelligences did not replace human judgment. They amplified it, processing chaos faster than any mind alone could manage. While the galaxy looked away, absorbed in politics, trade disputes, and the comfortable belief that the warning had been exaggerated, humanity prepared. Not for glory. Not for expansion. For inevitability. Council analysts eventually noticed inconsistencies. Energy signatures that did not match expected decline. Systems that showed no signs of collapse. hyperspace distortions that vanished before they could be explained. The reports were filed, reviewed, ignored. After all, humanity was isolated, dismissed, contained. They were supposed to fade into irrelevance. No one asked the dangerous question: what if silence wasn't absence, but discipline? By the time the galaxy realized the warning had never stopped, humanity was ready. And when the moment came, they would not need to announce it. Their preparation would speak for them. The warning proved correct. The first system fell without ceremony or declaration. One moment it was a living crossroads of trade and habitation, billions of voices woven into the rhythm of galactic commerce. The next, it was silent. Orbital defenses lay shattered in drifting arcs. Cities burned with cold precision, struck not in rage, but in calculation. The invaders named themselves nothing. The galaxy named them the Dominion. No records traced their origin. No precursor myths mentioned them. Their ships bore no heraldry, no attempt at communication. They did not demand surrender or tribute. They arrived, assessed resistance, and erased it. Worlds fell. Some were cracked from orbit, their surfaces reduced to lifeless glass. Others were stripped methodically, resources harvested, infrastructure dismantled. Entire populations were taken alive, loaded into massive transports, and removed from the stars they had called home. Species were enslaved, not merely for labor, but for assimilation, experimentation, and purposes the Council could not fully decipher before the data streams ended. Panic spread faster than information. Trade routes collapsed. Refugee armadas flooded hyperspace lanes. Emergency signals screamed across every frequency until the noise itself became meaningless. Council fleets, veterans of wars that shaped eras, were annihilated in hours. The Dominion learned faster than any enemy the galaxy had faced. Every defense exposed a weakness. Every victory became obsolete by the next engagement. Every assumption the Council relied upon failed. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. They argued. Some demanded total mobilization. Others insisted the Dominion must be reasoned with. Old rivalries resurfaced as empires accused one another of provoking the invasion. Votes were taken, rescinded, delayed, and buried beneath procedure. While the Council debated, systems burned. Entire sectors vanished from the map. Council-aligned worlds fell, buying time measured in minutes. Appeals for evacuation were denied due to logistical limitations. The institutions built to ensure galactic stability proved incapable of decisive action. The Council had dismissed the warning. Now it faced the consequence. And then someone noticed the pattern. Dominion fleets advanced relentlessly through Council territory, until they reached the outer boundaries of former human space. There, the advance slowed. Probes sent across the border never returned. Recon drones vanished without trace. Human space remained untouched. No refugee streams. No distress calls. No signs of collapse. Just silence. Fear crept into the Council chamber, not only of the Dominion, but of what that silence implied. Humanity had warned them. Humanity had prepared. Humanity had not been surprised. Reluctantly, desperately, the Council did what it had once refused to do. They turned to humanity. An emergency transmission was authorized, bypassing sanctions and restrictions that had silenced human voices for years. The signal crossed borders the Council itself had sealed and entered human space unchallenged. The reply came almost immediately. Not from a diplomat. Not from a civilian authority. From unified human command. The human on the screen looked calm. Not alarmed. Not vindicated. Prepared. "You are requesting assistance," the human said, voice even. The Council speaker struggled to maintain composure. "The Dominion threatens all sentient life. We acknowledge errors in judgment. Sanctions can be lifted. Trade restored. Humanity will be welcomed back as a full partner." There it was. An offer born of desperation. The human did not smile. "We warned you," the commander said. "You dismissed it. You silenced us. You isolated us." The chamber shifted uneasily. "The Dominion is not unexpected," the human continued. We identified the threat long before first contact. Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Our fleets were not built for conquest, the commander said. They were built because we knew this day would come. The council speaker leaned forward, fear breaking through protocol. Will you help us? A pause followed, long enough for the council to understand that the answer was no longer theirs to dictate. Yes, the human said at last. Relief flooded the chamber. Then the condition came. But not on your timeline. Silence fell. We will act when it ensures the highest survival probability, the commander continued. Not when panic demands it. The transmission ended. Across human space, dormant systems activated. Shipyards unlocked. Fleets that had never appeared on council registries powered up in perfect coordination. And as Dominion sensors detected vast movements in regions they had previously avoided. For the first time since the invasion began, the Dominion slowed. Because the warning the Council had dismissed had not been exaggerated. It had been restrained. And now the species that had been ignored was preparing to prove, not with words, but with action, that they had been right all along. The Galactic Council expected forgiveness. They had lifted restrictions, restored access, and spoken carefully worded admissions of misjudgment. In Council tradition, this was how history was rewritten, mistakes acknowledged just enough to move forward without consequence. Humanity did not accept the gesture. They assessed it. Within unified human command, Council offers were treated as data, not contrition. Strategic models ran continuously, overlaying Dominion advance patterns with evacuation probabilities and casualty projections. Every scenario reached the same conclusion. Timing mattered more than approval. The Council's follow-up messages grew increasingly urgent. Each carried new concessions, broader authority, louder assurances of partnership. Beneath them all was the same assumption, that humanity would rush to help, grateful to be acknowledged at last. They were mistaken. Humanity answered with a single transmission, broadcast without flourish or delay. We will decide when to act. The words spread across the council chamber like a pressure wave. Some delegates bristled at the defiance. Others felt something colder take hold. Humanity was not negotiating. They were informing. The galaxy no longer set their pace. Behind sealed borders and encrypted networks, humanity moved with quiet precision. Activation orders cascaded through human space. Fleets long held in readiness synchronized down to the microsecond. Deep space installations emerged from stealth, their mass and purpose hidden until the last possible moment. Humanity was not preparing a charge. They were reshaping the battlefield. Then, space began to tremble. Across multiple sectors, long-range sensors recorded impossible readings. Hyperspace currents twisted under controlled strain. Stars appeared to flicker as spacetime warped, as if reality itself were being stretched and anchored into new configurations. Navigation systems failed. Recalibrated. Failed again. This was not an attack. It was containment. Human scientists called it a stability lattice, a coordinated manipulation of gravity, hyperspace flow, and quantum fields designed to limit Dominion movement without catastrophic collapse. Risky. Unprecedented. Already active. Dominion fleets slowed. Not because they were challenged, but because physics itself began refusing them. The Council watched in stunned silence as projections changed. Dominion advance vectors bent, stalled, or vanished entirely. Regions once open to rapid invasion became constrained corridors, monitored and controlled. Humanity had not entered the war. They had redefined it. A final message from unified human command reached every major power, Council and Dominion alike. This conflict will proceed under controlled conditions, it stated. Escalation will not be permitted. No threats followed. None were needed. Humanity had made its decision long before the Council asked for help. They would not rush to prove forgiveness. They would act when survival demanded it. Space continued to tremble, not from fear, but from adjustment. Because the galaxy was learning, too late, that the warning humanity had once offered was not a plea. It was a forecast. And humanity had prepared accordingly. The war did not begin with an alarm. It began with silence. Across the front lines where Dominion fleets pressed deeper into Council space, hyperspace itself folded with deliberate control. There were no energy flares, no warning signatures, no chaotic emergence patterns. One moment, there was nothing. The next, humanity was there. Human fleets emerged in perfect silence, their arrival so precise that Dominion sensors registered them only after the formations were complete. Thousands of vessels held position without drift or collision, aligned with mathematical certainty as if space itself had been prepared for them. They were massive. They were precise. They were unstoppable. No banners marked them. No threat displays flared. The fleets did not advance or posture. They waited. Dominion command reacted instantly. Targeting systems engaged. Weapon arrays charged. Attack formations shifted into alignment. A single transmission cut through every frequency: Council channels, Dominion command bands, civilian emergency nets. Stand down. The message was calm, unemotional, final. The Dominion did not comply. Their opening strike never reached its targets. Energy weapons bent away as space-time curved under controlled human influence. Kinetic projectiles lost cohesion, tearing themselves apart as localized gravity fields unraveled their trajectories. Entire Dominion squadrons froze in place as propulsion systems were locked inside containment fields they could not override. Then humanity moved. Not forward. Through. Human strike groups vanished and reappeared inside Dominion formations, bypassing outer defenses entirely. Command vessels were isolated and neutralized in seconds. Quantum communication relays were severed, collapsing coordination before adaptive systems could compensate. This was not a battle. It was systematic disassembly. Resistance flared in isolated pockets and ended just as quickly. Human weapons targeted propulsion, power, and command infrastructure, leaving hulls intact and populations untouched. Dominion ships drifted helplessly, captured without mass destruction. Across multiple sectors, Dominion advances halted simultaneously. Slave transports were intercepted. Occupied worlds felt the shift as overseers lost control, supply chains collapsed, and escape routes vanished. The Council watched in stunned disbelief. This was war without chaos. Victory without devastation. Human fleets repositioned once more, surrounding Dominion core territories in a flawless three-dimensional encirclement. Hyperspace corridors collapsed into monitored choke points. Every vector of retreat disappeared. Only then did the Dominion attempt communication. Humanity answered once. "This war is concluded," the transmission said. "You simply failed to recognize the moment it ended." There was no final explosion. No heroic last stand. The Dominion stood down, not because they were outmatched, but because the concept of battle itself had been denied to them. The war ended before the enemy truly understood it had begun. And across the galaxy, the truth humanity had warned of became undeniable. Preparation mattered more than power. Control mattered more than numbers. The warning the Council had dismissed had been accurate. And humanity had just proven it. Decisively. Keycap 8. The New Reality. Title: Galactic Council dismissed the warning. Humanity proved them wrong. The Galactic Council survived the war. Its certainty did not. In the aftermath of the Dominion's defeat, the chambers filled once more with familiar rituals, resolutions, hearings, carefully worded declarations claiming unity and foresight. The Council spoke of shared victory, of lessons learned, of a renewed era of cooperation built on humility. Humanity listened. Then they returned to their work. Human fleets did not linger in triumph. They stabilized fractured hyperspace corridors, dismantled Dominion infrastructure, and oversaw the safe return of displaced populations. Worlds that had burned were rebuilt. Species once enslaved were given space, time, and protection to recover. No banners were raised. No authority was claimed. When the Council attempted to reassert control, dispatching patrols to secure liberated systems, they arrived to find everything already handled. Trade restored. Local governance re-established. Defensive measures calibrated and complete. The Council tried to reclaim relevance. It was too late. Sanctions held no weight. Political pressure found no audience. Invitations to rejoin old frameworks were acknowledged and declined. Humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. They had seen what centralized certainty did when it refused to listen. Instead, humanity proved a quieter truth. Power did not come from ancient titles or ceremonial chambers. It came from preparation, from adaptability, from the willingness to act when warnings were inconvenient. Across the stars, behavior changed. Pirate fleets dissolved when human signatures appeared on long-range scans. Slaver networks vanished without confrontation. Border wars paused, not because treaties were signed, but because someone was watching who would not hesitate to intervene. No ultimatums were issued. No laws imposed. Presence was enough. Humanity became a constant, an unspoken assurance in a dangerous universe. They did not police the galaxy. They did not judge it. They simply stood ready. If darkness rose again, if another warning was ignored, if extinction crept quietly toward the stars, humanity would be there. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the proof that some mistakes are only made once. And somewhere in deep space, sensors still watch for subtle distortions, tremors in reality itself that mean humanity has already seen the threat, already believed the warning, already prepared. Because the galaxy learned, at last, what happens when you dismiss the ones who are paying attention. The Galactic Council tried to reclaim control. They convened emergency summits, drafted sweeping resolutions, and declared the crisis a victory of collective galactic leadership. Committees were formed to oversee reconstruction. Jurisdiction was asserted over liberated systems. Authority was spoken as if saying the words would make them true again. It was too late. The war had not been won in council chambers. It had been ended in silence, precision, and preparation. Humanity did not challenge the council's claims. They did not argue for seats, titles, or recognition. While declarations echoed through marble halls and holographic chambers, human fleets were already withdrawing from combat zones, methodically, responsibly, leaving stability behind instead of power vacuums. Trade routes reopened under human escort. Evacuees returned home safely. Former Dominion worlds rebuilt without being claimed. No permissions were requested. No authority acknowledged. When council patrols arrived to secure systems, they found defenses calibrated, local governments restored, and human logistics networks quietly disengaging. There was nothing left to control. The council attempted leverage. Sanctions were proposed, then quietly abandoned. Political pressure was applied, then ignored. Offers of elevated status and permanent authority were extended, framed as rewards for cooperation. Humanity declined. They had no desire to rule the galaxy. Empires demanded obedience. Councils demanded compliance. Humanity demanded only readiness. They did not replace the Galactic Council. They rendered it unnecessary in moments that mattered most. Across the stars, behavior shifted. Pirate activity collapsed wherever human signatures appeared on sensors. Slaver networks vanished without warning. Border conflicts paused, not because treaties were signed, but because escalation no longer guaranteed survival. No ultimatums were issued. No threats spoken. Presence was enough. Humanity became a constant, not a ruler, not a judge, but a certainty. A civilization that watched quietly, listened carefully, and acted decisively when others hesitated. They proved a simple truth the galaxy could no longer ignore. Strength was not domination. It was preparation. And preparation saved lives. If darkness rises again, if another warning is dismissed, if extinction creeps toward the stars unseen, humanity will be there. Not to command, not to conquer, but to stand between the galaxy and the dark, as they always had. Only this time, the galaxy will be listening.